This is Mac OS Ken.
Greater than expected expectations, follow-up news around iPads, and Tuesday might have been a hard day to get attention. It is Thursday, the 20th of October, 2022. I'm Ken Ray, and this is news from Mac OS Ken, brought to you by yours truly and sponsored by SimpliSafe. Get 40% off your order when you visit simplysafe.com/macosken today. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macosken. If everybody expects Apple to beat expectations, where are we getting our expectations? Morgan Stanley analyst Eric Woodring is calling for a beat. Apple 3.0 ran part of a note he wrote. In it, he called for September quarter revenue of $90.1 billion, 2% higher than the street's expectations. What he's really into, though, is the December quarter. While he does not expect the massive September quarter earnings will put to rest investor concerns about a hardware downturn, he thinks Apple's December guidance will be constructive. According to his note, 3 points stick out in particular. First, he says, iPhone, iPad, and Mac production has remained remarkably stable, and in some cases stronger than we expected 90 days ago, despite signs of deteriorating consumer hardware spending intentions, as iPhone lead times remain extended, and improving component supply helps Apple catch up to iPad and Mac demand. The second thing is the shift toward the high end on the iPhone line. That'll keep ASPs higher through year's end in his expectation. And the third thing is timing. The analyst points out that Apple has a 14-week quarter this quarter. That sets up a favorable compare versus last year's 13-week quarter, letting Apple post an acceleration in year-on-year services revenue growth, and sets up the product business to grow above normal seasonality in the quarter. Mr. Woodring has an overweight rating on Apple shares. His price target on the shares is $177. If everybody expects take two, Apple 3.0 has run part of a note from Bernstein research analyst Tony Sacconaghi. He is already over the September quarter, it seems, and eyeing the ever-looming holiday season. It's kind of funny for a guy who's expecting something positive. He focuses pretty hard on the negative, but that's our Tony. He's worried about iPhone unit sales, choosing not to look at the rising ASPs thanks to sales of the Pro phones. He's also worried that Apple was a big beneficiary of the COVID crisis now that people aren't buying the way they were buying when they were locked down. Quoting the analyst, "We see risk-reward on Apple as neutral to modestly negative over the next 3 to 6 months. Ultimately, we worry that recent strength could revert in its hardware and are below consensus for fiscal year 23. Moreover, Apple's valuation remains elevated versus history and its tech peers." Hey, didn't I say he was expecting a beat? I did, and he is. It is, it seems, all about that 14th week in the December quarter. He and his estimate that Apple's extra week in the December quarter will add 7% plus to revenue growth, which does not appear reflected in consensus. Unless you read Morgan Stanley analyst Eric Woodring or Evercore analyst Amit Daryanani, come to think of it. Apple 3.0's Philip Elmer-DeWitt says get used to that 14-week thing. You will be hearing it a lot over the next few months. Sacconaghi has a market perform rating on Apple shares. His price target on the shares is $170. If you thought prices on Apple's iPad line were confusing already, hang on tight. A piece from Mac Rumors says the Cupertino company has lowered the price of the 11-inch iPad Pro in its Refurbished store. Not an M2, not an M1. This is the 2018 machine powered by Apple's A12 Bionic. Not the latest and greatest, though the prices may make them worth considering. According to the report, the 64GB refurbished model now costs $469. 256 gigabytes goes for $539, $512 for $689, and the 1TB model for $849. Good prices, though the machine's 4 years old. Your math may vary. While prices drop among the refurbs, minis rise outside the U.S. A separate piece from Mac Rumors says Apple significantly increased the cost of the iPad mini on Tuesday, despite that being the one segment of the iPad line untouched by updates. In the UK, the piece says prices for the two configurations of iPad mini rose 19% and 21%. In Italy, the prices rose about 18%. The report indicates that that's kind of indicative of the rest of the EU. Prices are said by the piece to be up in Australia, India, and the Asia-Pacific region, though to a lesser extent. In Australia, for example, the piece says iPad mini prices have risen by about 11%. Though Apple offered no reason for the price hike, a piece on the issue from 9 to 5 Mac figures a strong dollar is the reason. Both the pound and the euro are worth a lot less than they were a year ago, according to the report. Quoting the piece, if Apple wants to maintain its dollar margins, and you bet it does, then the only way to do this on overseas sales is to hike local pricing to bring in the same dollar amount. If you're wondering why the 10th Gen iPad has the camera position for landscape mode while the new iPad Pros do not, ask and answer a question asked and answered by Inverse. Where would you charge Apple Pencil to? Writing for the site, Raymond Wong figures that's got to be the issue. Put simply, he writes, there is no room to fit the webcam into iPad Pro's bezel, right when positioned vertically, top when held horizontally. On M2 iPad Pros and the iPad Air and iPad Mini, the side houses a magnetic connector for attaching and charging a second-generation Apple Pencil. This component is literally in the space where the webcam is located on the 10th generation iPad. May not make you happy, but that seems a likely answer. If you get a 10th generation iPad and go to plug in your old trusty headphones, try not to scratch anything. That piece from Apple Insider says the 3.5mm headphone jack is gone. That means your old faithful cans won't work. Of course, with a Lightning port replaced by USB-C, the last headphones Apple gave out free with devices won't work either. Not without heading to Dongletown. Dongleton Abbey. Where was I? If you want to hear what's happening on your 10th Gen iPad without everyone else hearing, your AirPods, AirPods Pro, and AirPods Max should work nicely, as will other wireless offerings. You can also use a set of USB-C headphones, or if you want to keep on keeping on with a 3.5mm connector, Apple sells a $9 adapter that'll send your sounds from a USB-C port to your old-fashioned audiophonic friend. More news in a moment, but first a word from today's sponsor, SimpliSafe, the right way to protect your home. If you've thought about protecting your home with security but have been waiting for the right time, now is that time. Right now, macOS Ken listeners can get 40% off SimpliSafe's award-winning home security system. I've told you that SimpliSafe was named the best home security of 2022 by U.S. News & World Report. I've told you that I use SimpliSafe to protect my home. I've told you how easy it was to get up and running, had my sensors and other equipment installed and active in under an hour, but do you know how extensive their offerings are? SimpliSafe blankets your home in protection with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door. HD security cameras for inside and out. Smarter ways to detect motion that only alert you when a threat is real. They even have hazard sensors that instantly detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. And you can deploy as much or little of it as you like. Whatever is right for you. Don't miss this chance to save big when you protect your home with the best. Get 40% off your order when you visit simplisafe.com/macOSKen today. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes. SIMPLI. That's simplysafe.com/macOSKen. There's no safe like Simply Safe. If you were trying to get attention in Apple's space on Tuesday, it was kind of hard to do if you weren't Apple. We had heard that retail workers in Australia had planned a 1-hour strike for Tuesday, the 18th of October. That happened the same day Apple announced new iPads and new Apple TVs. Engadget highlights a report from the New York Times saying about 150 store staff went on strike for an hour Tuesday after negotiations for better pay and working conditions hit an impasse. Sounds like that was just step one of who knows how much protest. On Wednesday, Engadget says, some employees refused to provide a mix of services that included repairing AirPods and managing deliveries. The piece says the actions are meant to drive Apple toward better time-off policies and higher wages. Apple is said to have offered employees a starting wage of $27.64 Australian, about $17.35 U.S. Australia's Shop, Distributive and Allied Employees Association is said to be pushing for $31 Australian, about $19.50 U.S. They say Apple's offer is a real wage cut that doesn't account for inflation. And finally today, Apple has offered a sneak peek at Season 2 of Slow Horses. The Mac Observer says the second season of the Apple TV Plus series deals with old intelligence coming to light. In Season 2, says Apple's description, long-buried Cold War secrets emerge, which threaten to bring carnage to the streets of London. When a liaison with Russian villains takes a fatal turn, our hapless heroes must overcome their individual failings and raise their spy game in a race to prevent a catastrophic incident. Academy Award winner Gary Oldman is back, along with Academy Award nominees Kristen Scott Thomas and Jonathan Pryce. The first 2 episodes of these 6 episodes of Season 2 hit Apple TV Plus on Friday, the 2nd of December. You can, of course, catch the trailer on YouTube. Today on the Daily Observations podcast from the Mac Observer, TMO managing editor Jeff Butts thinks the iPad lineup is a total mess, while I am confused by Apple TV 4K splitting threads. We'll talk the talk on the Mac Observer's Daily Observations podcast, online at macobserver.com or wherever you get podcasts. macOS Ken, brought to you by me and sponsored by Simply Safe. Get 40% off your order when you visit simplysafe.com/macOSKen today. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macOSKen. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media, online at backbeatmedia.com. You can reach me a couple of ways. Info at macosken.com or call 716-780-4080. Until next time, that is news from macOS Ken. I'm Ken Ray.
Ciao.